everyone, and a warm welcome to you. My name is Tori, and I am the Content and Research Manager at Nimbus 90. We're delighted that you're joining us this lunchtime for our final episode in our three-part series looking into the do's and don'ts for utilising data to build customer trust. In today's session, our panelists will be discussing how tech stacks and data strategies are evolving to close the trust gap and create mutually beneficial long-term relationships between a brand and a customer. So let's kick off with our discussion. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists for today. So we are going to be hearing from Paul Fakiridis, who is head of data at YourParkingSpace. We've also got Rob Murphy with us, who is the VP for go-to-market at mParticle. So I'd like to now hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their role. So let's start with Paul.
So hi all, my name is Paul. I'm the head of data at YourParkingSpace. I have been working for YourParkingSpace for 3 years now. In general, I have 9 years of experience as an analyst in the industry and 2 years of experience as an academic researcher. So yeah, this is pretty much about me.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Paul. And Rob, over to you.
Yeah, nice to meet and see everyone today. So I lead mParticle's go-to-market teams in EMEA. I'm passionate about scaling out EMEA teams for US software companies, and I've successfully done this over the years from Series C even all the way through to IPO. But more importantly for this conversation, over the past 12 years, I've been helping B2C brands to simplify the flow of customer data between systems and applications, breaking down silos and ultimately improving the customer experience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, so let's go into the discussion. Let's start by talking about data strategies. Where and how do you manage the data that drives your business, Paul?
So first of all, YourParkingSpace is an online marketing, an online platform. The business model is pretty similar to Airbnb's, although instead of rooms and apartments, we sell parking spaces, meaning that we gather data from different sources. One of the main issues as the company was scaling up was how to join all the sources together in order to get the most efficient analysis. The way that we managed to do that was through a data lake. To give an understanding of what types of data and sources we are using, mainly we have the product database, which was there from the beginning. But as I said, as the company was scaling up, we added sources as Google Analytics, so we can see the journey of our customers through our apps and the website. Also, we are using Apps Flyer, which is what Google Analytics does for the website, but for the apps for Android and iOS. Also, we have a built-in procedure called Cranium, which is pretty similar with Google Analytics, but it gives us a bit more detailed steps of the customer journey. Also, we have internal data sources like the Zero, which is now integrated in the data lake. We have Zendesk, which is for customer service, and this is integrated into data lake as well. The way that we managed to do all that was with a platform, a third party, called Clean AI, and we use it as a data lake. Then we have the next step in the data journey, let's say, that we have is the front end of the data lake, let's say, which is Snowflake. So Snowflake is a platform, is a well-known platform from where we manipulate all the data. And then we have the visualization tool, which is Tableau. The main reason that we wanted to have a data lake because at some point we had a vast amount of data and we wanted to process the data before it go into Snowflake and into the visualization tool. And the data lake gave us this opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Paul. Rob, so Paul's talking there about, having vast amounts of data. At mParticle, how do you support your clients to integrate data from different places and with lots of data moving around?
Yeah, I mean, simply put, we just help them simplify their customer data infrastructure, because all brands have more data from more sources, from more tools, all under more regulation than ever before. So it creates a really difficult problem for most brands today. So mParticle essentially helps customers build a trusted data pipeline. So one that can address the dynamic needs across the organization, that can also scale up as the complexity of use cases scales as well. But more importantly, one that can also protect data quality, adhere to privacy regulations, and ultimately connect the data in real time to any other tool. So if anybody on the call today has seen personalized playlists on Spotify or received any personalized offers through the Marks and Spencer's Sparks program, mParticle is the underlying customer data infrastructure that's making all of this possible. So essentially, how we do is like we ultimately provide tooling to simplify the event collection process, to ensure we've got data quality tooling to maintain and enforce data plans, to resolve identity, and then, as I mentioned, to ultimately connect that wherever it needs to go in the stack.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. And Paul, you mentioned there about going for a data lake. What was your kind of process like? How did you land on, a data lake over, more of a traditional approach or a data mesh? How did you kind of make that decision?
So, as I said before, we wanted ideally to have everything under one roof, let's say. And the only way to do that was through a data lake, actually through a warehouse on the cloud. And because YourParkingSpace, it was a startup, now we're scaling up very fast. We didn't have the capacity to build in a cloud warehouse at that time. And to be honest, and as I have seen from the result, it was a very good choice, because now the data lake, actually the integration, which is the most important thing, was very smooth. And we didn't have any issues after that. Plus, it gives us the capabilities without writing code to update tables, to make transformations. And especially with the transformations, it gives us the opportunity, apart from gathering all the sources, to pre-process the data from all these sources and pass this data to as a result, to Snowflake or Tableau, to a more consolidated result, easily digestible. And at YourParkingSpace, for example, we have external dashboards that we provide to our customers. We have to pre-process all this data in order to feed through the dashboard, so the dashboard is effective and efficient with all the filters, because it's live data.
Got it. Fantastic. Thank you. So we know small inaccuracies in data have the potential to cause big problems for businesses. How do you manage data accuracy and consistency? Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the saying garbage in and garbage out is thrown around a lot, but it is fundamentally true. So, I mean, how we help customers do this, it's ultimately about simplifying the collection points. So rather than having maybe, Paul's mentioned 5 or 6 tools they use in their technology. So rather than having all of those integrations built on a point-to-point basis, mParticle effectively will become like a middle layer between those solutions. So when data is getting passed into mParticle, be that from an app, web, backend system, etc., it's coming in and it's going through a series of checks. So first and foremost, it's all around data planning and data design and strategy. So if we're seeing an event coming through from a certain system, is it coming through in the format we expect? Does it adhere to a data plan? And if so, great, then we can pass that event through. But if not, we have the options to block that data or drop that data load, or even quarantine it in an S3 bucket somewhere that the data can be interrogated, fixed, and then played back in. But I think a lot of it comes down to trust. And if we're able to build the pipelines, we can trust the pipelines, and that's great. And the minute people feel like they can't trust the data, everything's going to start to unravel. So we've used data planning a lot to make sure we can maintain accuracy across all of the events that we're seeing, and then sending out that information to several other systems.
Fantastic. Okay. And Paul, I saw you nodding there when Rob was talking about quarantining data and having another look at it. Is that something that you do, or do you take a different approach?
So practically we do that. And at the moment, it's not the most efficient way because we set aside loads amounts of data, and it's very likely that we will never use them. Although the reason that we do that, because with data, you don't really know if you will use them or if they're useful in the future. So as Rob said, we have an S3 bucket as well, because we use AWS as well. And we store, let's say, all the junk data there. But there are some occasions that we have gone back to some of this data that were useful at that point of time. So I don't know if you want me to discuss about the accuracy issues that we have as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So practically at YourParkingSpace, we have 2 points of delivery. One is internal and one is external. Internal is within the company, which is very smooth most of the times, because there is a level of data literacy among the people. When we do that with external customers, we have to take into consideration several factors, and one of them, and most important, is data literacy generally, and if they are familiar and acquainted with data analysis. And as I have seen from my experience, it's very easy to lose trust from external customers, especially if at the beginning there is an error or something that doesn't make sense for them. So what we do at YourParkingSpace is that we take very seriously the first delivery of a dashboard, for example, and the data that we include there.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. So we're talking about kind of trust and confidence. Once your confident, effective data governance is in place, how can you then kind of analyze and utilize that data to personalize the customer journey, kind of take it to the next step? Rob, I know you talked a bit there about what you've done with people like Spotify. It would be great to hear from you a bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, once you trust the data, I mean, you can really do anything you want with it. So we've seen like the examples of personalized playlists on Spotify. We talked about Marks and Spencer's program, but like one of the campaigns we did, which was quite innovative, was actually Burger King. They wanted to encourage downloads of their application. And to do so, they came up with a really fun campaign whereby the user was given, download the app, and they said, if you go within 100 feet of a McDonald's store, we'll give you a voucher for a 1-cent Whopper burger if you go to your nearest Burger King. So you would then go to the nearest Burger King, and then you would get redeem, and then it would have that closed loop. But essentially, there's a lot of technology happening in place there. So first of all, it's like the application download, the geofencing of all of the different McDonald's stores, the push notifications that you've entered into a geofence, the voucher that you get from that as well, and then all the way through to the point of sale when you're in Burger King to actually redeem the coupon, and all of that feeding back. But those sort of really innovative use cases only happen when you've got like that data being federated in real time that's accurate to all of the different systems. And I mean, Burger King went from not even being anywhere ranked on the App Store to being the #1 ranked app in the US through that campaign alone. So I think once you've got real-time data that's trusted going between the different tools, it's the fun creativity can really start.
Fantastic, thank you, Rob. And you talked there about geofencing. For any of our members who haven't, used that in their marketing campaigns before, could you tell us a bit about what that looks like and what the benefits might be?
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple tools. It's the latitude and longitude. When you open up your phone, everybody's probably aware, but you're being tracked exactly where you are in the globe. So geofencing tools, there are many out there like Radar and a few others, will essentially let you set a little fence, and when something enters the fence or leaves the fence, you basically trigger an event to do something. So that's essentially geofencing.
Fantastic. And what are your thoughts about kind of building trust with customers with geofencing? If, for example, the customer might be aware, oh, this is being shown to me because I'm in, the area or something like that. How do you make that kind of a trustful encounter rather than something that might surprise a customer, for example?
Yeah, I think some of it centers around value exchange. So if the customer is willing to give up their location, are they getting something in return? Like, I'm sure I'd be willing to give my location to Paul and his team if I was trying to find a parking space that was close by. So yeah, it's just value exchange.
Fantastic. What are your thoughts, Paul? Do you use geofencing, and how do you go about that kind of value exchange with your customers?
So yeah, definitely. A big chunk of what we do has to do with geodata and coordinates, as Rob explained. One example is, for example, London and surroundings of London. When we have car parks in a radius of a specific tube station, for example, or train station, then we treat this car park differently because there are different customer journeys there with commuting, etc. Also, what we do is we count from the location that you make a booking, how much time it takes you to go to the actual car park. And these are data that helps us in different, in other ways, not just to understand the customer journey. I'm trying to think the other, because we have many applications of geodata. Another thing that we had, and an issue that we had in the past, was to transform some of the coordinates into actual UK postcodes. So to map better the demand and the supply that we have, but we have managed to do that through the data lake and with the script. These are the geodata procedure that we have in place that I can think of the top of my head.
Fantastic. Okay. And I'm wondering as well, when it comes to, some campaigns or activities that you had live around geofencing, when the pandemic hit, what was that like for, either your business, Paul, or your customers, Rob, and how did you kind of shift the focus to, perhaps where customers weren't going to be in a physical space, they were more at home? How did you adjust?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting examples we saw rolled out, particularly in the US, like curbside delivery and pickups. So actually, like, they want to make sure everyone has a good experience. There's obviously peak periods during the day when people typically order from restaurants. But they were able to use geofencing to actually prioritize, like, when should these meals be cooked based on how far away somebody was from that particular restaurant. So again, a really innovative way. So when someone was turning up, it was like within, a couple of minutes, their order is ready to be eaten, rather than having a really poor experience where they're waiting for a really long time, or their food's been cooked like 20-30 minutes ago. It's cold. So another interesting example.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so I guess that goes back to the point around personalization as well, and doing what's right for individual customers and timing it and that type of thing. Paul, what was your experience of that shift during the pandemic?
To be honest, YourParkingSpace, we were a bit lucky with the pandemic, because people use their cars more because they avoided the public transport, especially in cities where the public transport is very condensed, like London, Manchester, Birmingham. And we also saw, obviously, a shift to the locations. It was shifting from the commuting locations to locations that are close to parks, for example, to open spaces. and we had to adjust the marketing campaigns, for example, that we do, the ad campaigns on social media to adjust on this type of transition.
Really interesting. Okay, fantastic. So thinking then about, implementing these really interesting kind of innovative approaches that really benefit the customer, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what are some of the kind of pain points that come about on that journey. So Paul, do any kind of spring to mind when you're implementing, new approaches? Oh, I think you've gone on mute there, Paul.
Apologies. I think you have always to A/B test when you make a change. So you have to apply some statistical measures in place to see the actual change. And of course, to put everything, the result into perspective. Obviously, when we changed a marketing campaign during a pandemic, we did not expect that the result will be the same as other marketing campaigns. So we had to adjust the goals, the targets of each of the campaigns.
Fantastic. And Rob, with some of the campaigns and the partners that you've worked with, what were the biggest kind of pain points that they had when you first started working with them, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think there's a journey that most companies have to go through, and like the technology does not solve all of the problems. A lot of the problems are created by the culture around data, and then how it's being treated, how it's being designed and maintained going on. So I think there's a lot of work to bring teams together internally. So if they want to launch particular initiatives, like let's actually have a cross-functional approach to this particular initiative, and working together on the data strategy, working together on the data plans. Because like ultimately the marketer is going to want to go and say, hey, I want this like segment of users. Can you go build, Paul and his team, can you build the SQL query? Can you go find all these users and can you send it to me? And that just creates like an awful lot of dead time between like the idea of a campaign and the campaign execution. So I think if they're able to understand how they can help each other out when implementing new ideas and strategies, and that's kind of one of the ways mParticle has been helping, like particularly for marketers when they want access to better data so they can run more personalized campaigns, and the data engineers want more time back and not to be bothered by their marketing team all the time to pull new pulls of data. So so getting teams together and creating win-win situations would be my main thing there.
Brilliant. Paul, what are your experiences of some of the more kind of human factors and how you bring teams together to implement innovative solutions?
So that's an issue in the IT department generally. Unfortunately, I would say the majority of IT workers lack strong soft skills. And I think this is because most of the people, especially during studies or previous jobs, etc., they don't have interaction with other departments, with other colleagues. Although if you want to manage an IT department, this is a prerequisite. So you have to have soft skills. And for me, because as I said before, we have external customers that we have to talk about data and they're not very acquainted with data. I always want to hire people who have soft skills and are able to communicate the result effectively. Because the thing is, the way I see it is that at the end of the day, the final decision most likely will be made by someone who does not have technical skills. So you, as a department, you must be able to communicate this result to, let's say, your manager or whoever takes the decision and persuade them about your result. And this requires soft skills.
Fantastic, interesting. It's really interesting because we often hear, people say within organizations, more of the team need to understand the technical side of things, and to really get the most out of data, non-technical employees need to understand the data. And then on the other side, the very kind of highly technical team members, often you hear that they need to kind of develop their soft skills, so that you can create that team that works cohesively together. How have you kind of introduced any initiatives to bridge the gap in your organization?
So practically twice a month, we invite people in the department to show them what we do. And for example, I think it's very important for them to understand what they see on the website or in the dashboard, how it's being created, and the parameters that we put and the effort that this requires. Of course, you have to explain many things, and we don't go into detail. But at the end of the day, even if you only explain the sources, what each of the, let's say, chunks of code does in the dashboard, at the end, people tend to understand a bit better the result. Also, it's very important to explain to them some very basic statistical metrics, like the average, the median, the mean, and what's the difference between them, so they can understand it and pass it and explain it to the customer as well.
Fantastic. And Rob, when you're approaching a new customer, do you find that you have to think about how you talk about your products and services in ways that are digestible and accessible, or do you tend to be speaking to more of the technical side of the teams?
No, like we see data as a team sport, and really the conversations that we're in, it goes across the whole business. So from product through to analytics, through to marketing, engineering, and all the way up to the executives. So I think you need to be mindful of meeting the individual where they are in their journey, and then helping them, educating them, and kind of just showing them how other companies have solved similar challenges. So there's no point going in talking in coding language to a marketer, and there's no point going in talking about audience segmentation or particular creative ideas with when I say creative, Paul, don't get offended. I mean, creative is in like marketing, advertising creatives, rather than being creative on the engineering and data teams. So
Paul's very quiet there. I don't think he took offense though.
Fantastic. All good guys, none taken.
Very good. Okay, so I want to just remind our viewers that we do have a Q&A box. So please do put any questions you have in there. I know we do have a few that have come through. So let's see what we've got. There's one here which says, one thing we're struggling with at the moment is empowering marketing teams and customer teams to utilize data. Do you have any tips on how to make those groups, how to take those groups with you on the journey?
Sorry, is that question for me?
Yeah, do you have?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think that the most important thing is to ask the right questions before you do anything else. To actually set a goal of what you are looking for and what you want to achieve with that. That's the most important thing. And then you can, the analyst can take it from there. But if the goal is not clear, then the analysis will be very vague, and most likely it will not result to actually adding value to the department.
Great, fantastic. And Rob, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think Paul's kind of adequately addressed that one.
Fantastic. Okay. So, Paul, a big part of what you do at YourParkingSpace is to make data digestible to people who don't have that kind of technical background. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you go about visualizing data and what you do to really make it exciting and engaging for non-technical staff.
So first of all, we try to personalize the dashboard. So we are using, because we have different companies, so we are using their colors, their branding in general. So they're familiar, at least with the colors that they're seeing. Generally, we avoid to have very bright colors. We want it to be very clear as a dashboard. To go a little bit more technical, we allow some spaces between the views in dashboards. We have a white background. Generally, we wanted to make very straightforward from the beginning, especially if we are talking about a customer who hasn't had a dashboard before, because that's very important. And this is happening. Actually, this is the first step of the process. When we gather requirements, we want to understand if the customer, the level of literacy, and then we build the dashboard accordingly. If they don't have any experiences, the examples that I said before, plus if we add even the smallest statistical metric there, we explain. So we have a tab, when you hover over, it explains everything for the customer.
Brilliant. Okay. And Rob, in your view, how can enterprises visualize their data in ways that enable the whole business to take value from it? Oh, I think we've possibly lost Rob. Don't know if he is having technical issues. But in the meantime, Paul, there is a question for you from the audience. So earlier we were talking about trust, and you talked about how easy it can be to lose customer trust, especially at the beginning of the relationship. So how can you win that trust back once it's been lost? Is there any coming back from that?
Yes, I think there is, and as a department, you must be prepared for such a scenario, because it's inevitable. At some point, you will make a mistake. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. I think that the most important thing is just to be transparent with the customer and to explain why this result happened and why it will not happen again. Of course, if it happens once or twice, yeah, it is reversible. But if you do like a result like 10 times, it's wrong, then it's very difficult to go back, because the thing, if you put yourself into the customer's position, you will understand that, because you're not very sure what you are seeing is 100% accurate. And the thing is, even if it is like 90% accurate, you don't know where the 10%, from where the 10% is missing. So practically, you cannot make any decisions about it.
Okay, and how do you manage customers' expectations about levels of accuracy? Do you find that they often do want things to be 100% accurate, or do customers have that understanding that there will be an element of inaccuracy?
I think they want to be 100% accurate, especially when it comes to revenue, number of bookings. So very strong indicators for them. But again, the main issue when we talk, for example, about 91% accuracy, when you present something, the customer will never know what's the 9% that's missing. And I think this will distract them from making a decision solely from the dashboard or from the data that you present. My advice for this, especially when it's a new customer, you have to create something not very basic, but not so much complicated, and to make sure that everything is accurate there. And then, as soon as you build the trust with the customer, you can make the extra step and add some more complicated views, etc.
Okay, interesting. Rob, we were just talking about, how to visualize data so that it enables the whole business to take value from it. Do you have any kind of tips or advice on how to visualize data in ways that are digestible?
Yeah, I think the storage, I mean, I'm not an expert on the visualization piece of it, but I definitely think there's definitely some habits that I've seen work really well. So I think like the first one is probably like collecting your own data. The old saying goes, if you want something done right, you should do it yourself. So if you want your data to be accurate and reliable, you should collect it yourself from sources that you own rather than trying to leverage like third-party cookies and all of these other data sources. The second is probably focusing on the why, which we've touched on a couple of times during the conversation. So the more complex customer journeys become, the more opportunities there are to collect data on your users' actions or different behaviors. And I guess like it's very tempting to fall into the trap of let's just collect as much data as possible, rather than taking a step back and really agreeing with all the people involved that the use cases and business goals should always inform the data points that you collect and not the other way around. I think there's some other basic things like establishing consistent naming conventions that are used across teams, being able to create a data plan and use it as your source of truth. And then finally, like just validate data early and often. So even with a thorough data plan and close alignment between all the stakeholders, mistakes can happen. But if mistakes happen, ultimately bad data can slip past initial quality checks and into all of the other internal pipelines. I think from a visualization perspective, I think it's using best of breed tools designed with a specific user in mind. So if you've got a good foundation, you've got data pipelines that you trust, it's then very easy to plug in different tools. So if you want to create a lot of customized bespoke reporting, I think Paul mentioned he uses Tableau, great tool for that. If it's like a product manager that just wants to understand the customer journey, there's Amplitude, Mixpanel, and many others that you could use. So I think give the team what they want, so they can ultimately do their jobs a little bit easier.
Excellent. Some really good tips there. Really, real variety of advice. That's excellent. Thank you. Paul, from what Rob said, does anything in particular really jump out at you? You think, that's something that we don't do at the moment that maybe we could, or something that you are doing that you would agree really works?
What the main difference, I think, with what we do is that the customers that we have, they are not familiar with the whole concept, meaning they are not product managers, for example. They are not marketing managers. Most of them, they haven't seen data before. And that makes us that means that they don't know the complexity of gathering the data and how difficult it is just to get it right 100%. Most of the times you cannot get it right 100%. But that's very difficult for them to explain, especially we have like many customers that they manage a car park, for example, and they haven't used a lot computers. They are elderly, for example. That makes it, it's not like that it will happen because they are elderly, but in many cases we have issues to pass basic information to them. And we have to make it very, very clear what they are seeing, how we have put it in the dashboard, why, etc. So that's a problem for us at the moment. But yeah, I mean, we're getting better in terms of educating the customer.
Yeah, fantastic. And perhaps there's a point there around different generations, different things working for people who have been working differently throughout their careers. And do you find that it's a different process if you're speaking with kind of a millennial or a Gen Z or a baby boomer? Do you almost kind of divide up your approach in that way, or is it not that simple?
I don't think that we divide it this way, but I mean, if you see it in the big picture, yes, there is a difference, which obviously makes sense, especially if you have a customer that has worked in the same company for all of their lives, and meaning that they didn't have the chance to make the SME a little bit more comfortable with technical aspects, numbers, etc. That makes it even more difficult. Another issue that we have with this is that if they had a different approach of reading data before, and that makes us, and now we go to a more transparent online and live data analysis. And this is a bit tricky for us because the customer have used to use a specific procedure for like years. And now we go there and we say, okay, look, this is more effective from the way you do it. But it's very difficult for them to adapt to it. It's very difficult to change the way that you're taking decisions.
Absolutely. So it's kind of making change happen and creating that transformation, bringing everyone with you. Again, thinking, more about perhaps the human aspects than just the technical and data aspects themselves. Rob, one of the kind of top tips you gave there was around first-party data versus third-party data. Do you have any kind of further tips around how to develop a first-party data strategy and help organizations kind of grow their first-party data? I think you're on.
I think it's like it's imperative for every company to do this, because we know like deprecation of third-party cookies is coming in the next few years, and like if you're not able to build up a first-party data set now, like what data are you going to have? So I think it's like really to be treated with a lot of urgency. So I think like there's many sources you can start to collect it, like your website, mobile apps, other interactions that you have with your customers. And like the good news is like it's all your properties, so what you collect is going to be really good quality. And it's stuff that you're going to be able to use to power other interactions with your customers, be that on social advertising, be that on email, SMS, whatever the channel is. So I guess like it comes back to understanding like the business drivers, understanding the use cases that can help you achieve those business drivers, and then mapping all the way back to like what data would we actually need to power this type of campaign to help us increase users in this particular area, for example.
Excellent. And Paul, what are your thoughts on this debate around kind of first party versus third party, and how do you approach it at YourParkingSpace?
I think it's imperative that you have your own data. So you have first data, as Rob said. That should be, if you have the capacity, of course, to do it, your main source of taking decisions. Although, if you want to have a bit more complex analysis, then you do require third-party data. For example, at YourParkingSpace, we have seen a strong indicator between increase of bookings and increase of precipitation of rainfall. So we wanted to check that with a third party to get data, weather data, and analyze them against our bookings. This is not something that we could have on our own. And there are other examples as well. So yeah, I think that it's very, very important that you have your own database, because you can tweak a little bit what you are getting. Plus, if you want to go like a step further, you need to have the third-party ones.
Okay, fantastic. So it's about having that core base of your own data and then thinking carefully about what types of third-party data will actually really enhance your business and help you to meet your objectives. Yeah,
and this has to do again with the thing that we discussed before, that we have to ask the right questions. So what we wanted to see, for example, with the rainfall, we want to see if there is a correlation, for example. So we had the bookings, what we were looking for was the weather data. So we went and got the weather data.
Really interesting. Okay, thank you. So we're nearly out of time, and I just have one more question to finish off the session with. I'd like to know what trends you're seeing in the data world that really kind of interest you, and how you see those contributing to improving the customer experience. Rob, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see, like, in what we do, customer data infrastructure, like really three phases of it. The first of which is data wrangling, second is intelligence, and the third is autonomy. We see, like, most companies are really in that data wrangling phase still, but starting to see some really interesting applications of machine learning and AI to really like personalize down to like single digit audience sizes, which we've seen. So yeah, I think just the applications of AI and ML on the really trusted data set is ultimately driving better experiences for everybody involved.
Fantastic. That's really interesting that you're able to go into that level, kind of single digit personalization. Thank you. And Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree completely with the autonomy. For example, I have seen it lately that more and more companies, from startups to medium enterprises, are starting to have their own IT and data analysis departments, engineering, etc. So there is a significant shift of autonomy between especially the IT companies. Also, in terms of the job market, I see that there is a huge demand for data engineers and data analysts at the moment. I see a little bit of a plateau between the data scientist's position, and the way that I define that is, I mean, a data scientist will use specific algorithms, a little bit more advanced statistics, mathematical approaches, etc. And the way I think that there is this trend is because from one side, the companies have their own autonomy, but they don't have reached the level of data literacy, so they can use efficiently a data scientist. So most of the companies, most of them, they don't really need a data science by definition. That's why there is a huge demand of data engineers and data analysts at the moment.
Oh, that's really interesting. So would you say it's more the kind of big advanced companies that might be utilizing AI who have a need for data scientists, where most companies would just require a data engineer or analyst?
It really depends. It may be a small company that specializes specifically on AI, or this is the product that they have. But most of the companies, they don't have the capacity at the moment to utilize data in such extent. So through algorithms to improve your performance, to improve your customer journey, etc. I mean, of course, there are many companies that they do that, but you must have a specific data journey in order to do that efficiently.
Okay, really interesting thought to close on. So this has been really insightful discussion. I think there's lots of tips that people can take from this chat that we've had. So thank you so much to you both for joining us, and of course thank you to our audience for listening in today. To those who are listening, if you do have any thoughts or questions, please do reach out to us at Nimbus 90 or to our partner mParticle for more information on any aspect of today's panel. So once again, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.